Hi everyone, this is video 2 of the Triangle Construction Project demo where we're going to go through and finish creating some of the major segments and points and lines that we need to for our project. So make sure you've watched video 1 at this point where we've gone ahead and selected our city. We saved it as a snip using the snipping tool. We've uploaded it, scaled it, created folders, constructed different points and learned how to label them. We also did that with segments. And we lastly classified this triangle by making it an isosceles triangle by adjusting some of the points. So for this first demo we're going to do here on this is we're going to create a parallel segment. So the first thing we want to do is figure out somewhere we want it to be. So I'm going to choose to make my Titans Airport segment, so segment TA, to make that parallel. And actually, before I forget, one suggestion I just thought about that would be helpful here is, since I'm calling the Grand Ole Opry point G, why don't we say Grand Ole Opry parentheses G? And that'll just remind me that it is point G according to Desmos. Titan Stadium will be point T. And then lastly, the airport is going to be point A. We cannot duplicate points, so it's really important to keep that in mind as we're going through this. All right, I definitely want something to cross through the Parthenon. So that's a very big attraction in the city of Nashville. So what I'm going to do is we'll make sure I hit the back button, make sure our arrow tool is selected. We're going to click on the segment drop down and choose parallel. Now at the top, it'll give you directions of what you need to do. So it says first, choose a line to be parallel to. So I'm going to go ahead and hover over and click on that segment TA. And now notice when I move my mouse around, I can make a line and it's going to be parallel no matter what. So I'm going to go ahead and make my Parthenon part of this line. Now where my mouse is irrelevant. We're actually going to be hiding this parallel line after we create our tunnel. So I'm going to go ahead and just randomly click it right here. Notice that my line is touching the Parthenon right there. So we'll go ahead and click, and that means our parallel line is created. Now we're not going to keep this because this goes on forever, and we don't want that. We want to be able to have segments used here as our tunnels or tracks, however we're looking at this. So I'm going to go ahead now and select all my point tool, and I'm going to click on the Parthenon, make sure it snaps to that line. It should like automatically show up there. So we'll click on Parthenon. And then there's actually another airport out here that I'm going to choose, more like a municipal local airport. We're going to go ahead and make that the other endpoint here. Now that we've created that, we can actually hide our parallel line so we don't need it anymore. So I'm going to hover over and click on the parallel line, and then there's a hide button here that will disappear. That original point that I used, the guiding point, I will click on that and hide it as well because we're not going to need it. You'll notice over here on my menu, it has those grayed out. So we're not going to use them in our project. But these 2 points are part of our project, so I'm going to go ahead and click and slide them down into my point folder. So we've done that. Let's expand that, and let's go ahead and let's label these. So P1 looks like it's the other airport. Now, I can't call it A, so I'm going to call it J. And this is I'm going to call small airport. And we're going to call it point J because it's John C. Toon Airport. All right, and then my second one is going to be the Parthenon. We did not use point P yet, so let's go ahead and use capital P, and let's go ahead and call it the Parthenon. All right, there we go. So we've created those new points. Let's go ahead and create our new segment. Anytime stuff's selected, you can always hit the back button, and that will unselect it. Drop down, we'll choose the segment tool, and let's connect the airport and the Parthenon together. That segment you see shows up. Let's go ahead and slide that into our segments folder so we have that for later on. So we'll remember that segment JP. Oh, let's go ahead and make Parthenon a P after that so I remember it's point P. Okay, so we've created our parallel line, and so now we've taken care of that. So let's click on the arrow tool. So let's go ahead and let's do a few other things. I want to connect these together. I don't want these tunnels to not be connected. So why don't we go ahead and connect Titans and Parthenon together? Create a brand new segment, snap those together. Again, that shows up. So since it doesn't have a name, click and drag, we'll add that to our segment. All right, we've got that taken care of now. Next thing we're going to do is we want to create a midpoint. So we're going to create a midpoint, and then we're actually at the same time going to create our perpendicular bisector. So you need a couple midpoints for your project. I'm going to go ahead and click on this down arrow and select midpoint. And well, let's hover over that new tunnel that we just created right here and click on the dot. So we'll have this new midpoint station. It's not been labeled yet. You see it's over here on my menu. So let's click and drag that down into my points folder. And we got to create a name for it. So notice it's called midpoint of L4. It looks like there's something called the nations. Maybe it's a neighborhood there. So why don't we go ahead and call it point N, and we'll just call it, well, the nations. Point N. All right, so that's one of my midpoints. And you can actually see on here, it says midpoint, so that'll confirm to you that you have done one of those successfully. I'm gonna close my point folder, go back and click on my arrow tool. And so next up on our list, on our checklist, let's go ahead and find a perpendicular bisector. So to do that, we already have our midpoint. So you do need a midpoint in order to do perpendicular bisector. So what we're gonna do is click on our drop down, and once again, just like we did with parallel, we're gonna select perpendicular. It says choose a line to be perpendicular to. Well, I wanna be perpendicular to segment JP here, so the airport to the Parthenon, and I want it to specifically go through my nations. So let's go ahead and click on that. And once again, we've created another perpendicular, or a segment here, I'm sorry, a line, but we want to create a segment from it. Sorry, I'm trying to do this in one take. We're going to press the back button. And so I need to figure out, just like we did with the parallel, another station maybe to throw up here somewhere. So it looks like this area generally is called Northwest Nashville, or it says the Haines area. Why don't we create a station up here? These guys should be able to connect to the city if they want. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing we did before. We're going to click on point. We're going to hover over here, and it doesn't really matter where we put it. So let's put it right there. Just as we've been doing, we need to continue to keep these points in mind. A perpendicular line can now be hidden, so we can actually hide this now. There we go. It's hidden. Notice it turns gray. But that new point we just created, well, yeah, we do need to move that down into here. Open that points folder. Notice how we're almost already at 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're already at 7 points. So we're actually getting close to the minimum number of stations you need for your project. Let's go ahead and call this Haines. There we go. And we need to connect those to make a segment. So that's going to be another one of my tunnels. So the segment tool, we're going to connect Haines with the nation, and we've got ourselves a perpendicular bisector. Last thing we need to do, though, is we do need to take that new segment that we've created, and we're going to need to move that, there it is, down into my segments folder. All right, we are almost there. We have now constructed almost everything that we need to for this project. The last thing we need to construct is an altitude. To create an altitude, let's remember how it's created. An altitude is going to be perpendicular to one side of the triangle, and it must intersect with the opposite angle per se of that, or the vertex of that triangle. So let's go back to the original triangle that I drew over here, the Titans Airport and Opry one. I want to create an altitude that is perpendicular to Titans Airport, but is also going to cross through the Grand Ole Opry station. So in order to do that, what we have to do is once again go back to that perpendicular tool, and it says choose a line to be perpendicular to. So I'm going to go ahead and select that Titans Airport line again. And this time what we have to make sure we do is it has to cross through the Grand Ole Opry. Otherwise, it's not an altitude. So if I hover my mouse over here and we click on it, that's going to go ahead and create a special segment here that will go from the Opry down to this area here. Now, this once again is a line, so we're going to repeat this process for the third time. I need to create a second point, hide the perpendicular line, and then we'll connect them to make our next tunnel. So I'm going to use my point tool. I need the station to be right here specifically because that is the intersection of the altitude and the opposite side. So we will go ahead and click that. Now that that's been clicked, my perpendicular line can go and disappear. It's gone. And it looks like this is the point I need to go down and label. So let's hover that down into those points. That's near a museum. So let's call it museum. We don't have to be specific about this. So I did not use point M yet. I did not. So M, and then let's go ahead and call it museum. All right, awesome. We are just about there. The last thing I need to do is we need to connect those 2 points together to create our altitude segment. So we'll go ahead and click, and that creates our altitude. Now at this point in the project, I've done a majority of what we need to do here. It's important to probably go down our checklist, which is what I'm going to do next. So the next and last part of this video, part 3, is going to have me go down the checklist of everything I've done and maybe I'll have to create one or two extra segments or an extra point or station to meet all of the checklists for the project. But on video 3, I will walk you through that part. So thank you for watching.